Spring is here, and with that come the allergies. With so many already feeling the impacts, we wanted to bring in AccuWeather's allergy expert, senior meteorologist Alan Reppert, to discuss the spring allergy forecast. So, Alan, I know that you've been tracking this for many years and have become our in-house expert. So, what do you feel are the biggest overall takeaways from AccuWeather's spring allergy forecast this year?
One of the big things is, since we did have such a warm start to the late winter and early spring, is we're going to be seeing a really intense and really could be a long tree pollen season that we more than what we typically see across much of the east, even into the plains and even into the Rockies. So it's going to be a really intense start to things. And as we progress in the grass pollen season, this early warmth is really going to build things up and keep the grass pollen quite intense over much of the summer season.
Okay. And in a general way, you mentioned most areas from the Rockies east. Are there any specific, more localized areas where we could be dealing with the worst of the prolonged problems?
Yes, tree pollen will especially be problematic from the coastline of Georgia through much of Maine, including some of the big cities in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. It really looks like it's going to be a really intense tree pollen season for those areas. And as we get back into like the central Rockies around Denver, even into Albuquerque and through parts of the central plains, including Kansas City, that could be a really intense pollen season for tree pollen season for the area. And then as we go into the grass pollen, we see a lot of issues that we're looking at for much of the Pacific Northwest and again along much of the eastern coastline.
And how do we expect the developing La Nina might contribute to the prolonged duration of weed pollen as we get into the second half of the year?
With the developing La Nina, we're going to look at a lot bigger hurricane season than we typically see and a lot more tropical activity. That'll bring a larger increase in rainfall to much of the area from the Texas Gulf Coast to even into Maine. So it's going to be a very intense grass season and even going into weed season as we have a lot of rainfall around, a lot of moisture for the grass and the weeds to grow with. Anytime that it does rain, though, it will bring at least a momentary relaxation to that pollen that we're seeing, but the pollen is just going to continue to be a problem for most of those areas.
Any other significant breaks beyond sort of the short-term rain-related breaks?
There will be at least some relief across parts of the plains and even into the west as we get more into summer. Drier conditions are going to dominate. That's looking like it's going to at least bring some cooler, or not cooler, but less intense pollen for most of the area, and that should really help. And any rain would just bring a very momentary increase in the pollen levels to most of those areas.
And Alan, you mentioned different areas with different types of threats or at least hazards for allergy sufferers. Is there anything that people can do in the east versus in the west to mitigate some of the symptoms?
Really, one of the big things is just stay ahead of the allergies. If you typically see allergy issues, that you get sneezy, watery eyes, itchy, just try and take your medicine beforehand. If the medicine isn't helping, really my biggest advice is to go to an allergist. But more of the simple things that you can do, or just anytime you go outside, try and change clothes as quickly as possible once you get inside to keep any of the pollen that you get on you from being transported across the house or any indoor area. And also stay in the air conditioning as much as possible, especially during the grass and the weed pollen seasons. That should help things. Keep the windows closed and really just try and stay inside during the midday hours and even into the early afternoon.
And a good HVAC filter can do wonders in mitigating some of that as you're drawing air inside. Great advice there. Alan Reppert, senior meteorologist here at AccuWeather. Thanks again, Al.
Thanks.